They may be a little lumpy, but for lumpy potatoes, you must admit they're nice and lumpy.
Ricky Nelson once had everything: fame, fortune, hit records, and a face recognized by millions. Born into one of America's most beloved entertainment families, he grew up in front of television cameras and became one of the biggest rock and roll stars of his generation. But behind the perfect smile and polished image was a man carrying pressure, loneliness, and struggles the public never truly saw. And when tragedy struck on New Year's Eve in 1985, the truth about Ricky Nelson's life began to surface. Rumors exploded across headlines. Stories spread faster than facts. And his family spent years trying to protect his legacy before the world remembered him for the wrong reasons. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Prestige Buzz, and turn on the bell notification so you never miss another story. Ricky Nelson was born Eric Hilliard Nelson on May 8, 1940, in Teaneck, New Jersey. Entertainment was already in his blood. His father, Ozzie Nelson, was a successful bandleader, and his mother, Harriet Hilliard, was a singer and actress. By the time Ricky was a child, the family had already become famous through radio. In 1944, the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet debuted on radio, and Ricky and his older brother David quickly became part of the show. America watched the Nelson family grow together, first on radio and later on television. When the show moved to ABC in 1952, it became one of the most successful family sitcoms of its era. To viewers, Ricky looked like the perfect American teenager. But away from the cameras, he was shy, sensitive, and deeply introverted. Friends described him as caring and humble, someone who never cared about status or money. He loved sports, especially tennis and skating, and tried to live as normal a life as possible despite growing up in the spotlight. Everything changed when Ricky discovered rock and roll. As a teenager, he became obsessed with the sound coming out of Sun Records. His biggest idol was Carl Perkins, whose music inspired Ricky to chase a career of his own. One day, after a girl laughed when he joked about making a record himself, Ricky decided to prove her wrong. He took demos to multiple record labels and got rejected over and over again. Executives believed nobody would buy records from someone they could already watch for free every week on television. But eventually, Verve Records gave him a chance. That decision changed music history. In 1957, Ricky recorded his first songs, and almost instantly they became massive hits. Millions of teenagers fell in love with his music. Between 1957 and the early 1960s, Ricky Nelson became one of the biggest names in rock and roll. His appearances on television helped him reach audiences in a way no artist had ever done before. As he grew older, he dropped the Y from his name and became Rick Nelson, hoping people would finally see him as a serious artist instead of a teenage TV star. But escaping that image proved nearly impossible. In 1972, he released Garden Party, a song inspired by being booed at a revival concert when audiences demanded he only perform his old hits. The lyrics revealed the frustration building inside him for years. Rick wanted to evolve, but fans refused to let him move beyond the version of himself they remembered from the 1950s. That pressure slowly began tearing him apart. Behind the fame, his personal life was becoming increasingly difficult. After years of success, his career started losing momentum. Major venues disappeared, replaced by exhausting tours through small clubs and supper theaters. By the 1980s, Rick was performing nearly 250 shows a year just to stay financially afloat. At the same time, stories of substance abuse and personal struggles followed him everywhere. Books and biographies later claimed he turned to substances as a way of coping with stress, disappointment, and the crushing expectations that had surrounded him since childhood. His relationship with his father also added to the pressure. Ozzie Nelson carefully controlled much of Ricky's public image and career from an early age. On television, Ricky played the carefree, happy son America adored. In reality, he was far more complicated and emotionally withdrawn. For 14 years, he lived inside a character that never truly reflected who he was. Even comedy shows later mocked the contrast between his clean-cut image and his real life. But for Rick, those jokes hit harder than most people realized. He had spent decades trying to escape an identity created for television audiences. Meanwhile, his marriage was collapsing. Rick married Kristen Harmon in 1963, and together they had 4 children: Tracy, twins Gunnar and Matthew, and later Sam. From the outside, they looked like another perfect Hollywood family. But behind closed doors, things were falling apart. Both Rick and Kristen struggled with substance abuse during the 1970s. They tried therapy and rehabilitation, hoping to save both their marriage and themselves, but the damage kept growing. Kristen later admitted they were both lost during those years. Eventually, she made the painful decision to leave for the sake of their children. Their divorce became bitter, emotional, and financially devastating. By the early 1980s, Rick Nelson's fortune had largely disappeared. Despite decades of fame, he was drowning in debt and relying on non-stop touring to survive. Then came the night that changed everything. On December 31, 1985, Rick boarded a private plane headed from Alabama to Texas for a New Year's Eve performance. Traveling with him were his girlfriend Helen Blair and members of his Stone Canyon band. Not long after takeoff, something went terribly wrong. According to the surviving co-pilot, problems began with the aircraft's heater. Warning lights repeatedly turned on and off, and the crew kept restarting the heater despite concerns about safety. Minutes later, thick smoke suddenly filled the cabin and cockpit. The pilots could barely see. The plane crash-landed near DeKalb, Texas, but the fire spread too quickly. Rick Nelson, Helen Blair, and 5 others died from smoke inhalation and burns before they could escape. Only the 2 pilots survived. When the news broke on New Year's Day in 1986, shock quickly turned into speculation. Rumors spread that substances on the plane had caused the fire. Headlines pushed the story aggressively, and many people immediately believed it. The toxicology reports only added fuel to the controversy after traces of illicit substances were found in several victims, including Rick himself. To the public, it looked like confirmation. But the official investigation told a completely different story. After an 18-month investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board concluded there was no evidence that illicit substance use caused the fire. Investigators found no related equipment or proof that anything involving substances had started the blaze. Instead, evidence pointed toward the aircraft heater. The report stated the fire originated near the heating system, though investigators could not determine the exact mechanical failure. The NTSB also criticized the pilot for failing to properly handle the emergency, saying passengers might have survived if correct procedures had been followed. Still, the rumors never fully disappeared. For decades, many people continued believing the false version of events. Rick Nelson's family repeatedly fought to defend his reputation and separate fact from speculation. But the tragedy did not end with the crash. After Rick's death, his children discovered something devastating. Despite decades of success, he had left behind nearly $4.5 million in debt. His twin sons, Gunnar and Matthew Nelson, were only 18 years old. They faced a difficult choice. They could declare bankruptcy and walk away from the debt entirely, or they could spend years paying it back themselves. Most people expected them to choose bankruptcy. Instead, they chose to protect their father's legacy. The brothers knew that bankruptcy could cost them control of the family's intellectual property, including music rights, television rights, and ownership connected to the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. More importantly, they believed their father would never have wanted his debts abandoned. So they worked. For years, Gunnar and Matthew toured relentlessly, building their own music careers while slowly paying off what Rick owed. Their success eventually exploded in 1990 when their album After the Rain sold millions of copies and made them stars in their own right. It took nearly a decade, but they finally cleared the debt completely. Years later, the brothers released a memoir to address the rumors that had haunted their father's name since 1985. They wanted people to remember the truth, not the gossip. Because behind the fame and television smiles was a family struggling with pain, addiction, pressure, and loss just like countless others. Ricky Nelson spent his entire life trying to live up to an image the world created for him. Millions saw the perfect television son and the clean-cut rock star. Few saw the loneliness, the exhaustion, or the battles happening behind closed doors. And in the end, the tragedy that took his life became overshadowed by rumors that were never true. But for his family, the real story was never about scandal. It was about a talented man who spent his life searching for acceptance beyond the image everyone expected him to be. Thanks for watching Prestige Buzz. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe to Prestige Buzz, and hit the bell notification for more powerful stories, forgotten truths, and untold Hollywood history.